Police say teens are being recruited by suspected migrant gang members at the city-funded Manhattan shelter, recruited to commit crimes in Times Square with near impunity for a gang that originated in a Venezuelan prison.
Now the NYPD telling news.
So one of the most dangerous gangs on the planet isn't just operating in New York City. Now they're recruiting new members, some of whom are under 18. And now these new recruits are committing crimes on behalf of the gang in Times Square, which is a short walk from their city-funded asylum shelter. But the problem is that since New York is a sanctuary city and these criminals are minors, our legal system does not have the tools to stop them.
The NYPD's Detective Bureau is tracking the dangerous Venezuelan gang Tranter. It's made up of young migrants, some just 11 years old and believed to have arrived here in New York during the migrant surge.
They're young, some as young as 11 years old. Police say they first targeted Central Park this summer, and now Times Square is their playground. Assistant Chief of Detectives Jason Savino focuses on gangs, and this gang, he says, is made up of asylum seekers being housed at the Roosevelt Hotel.
Right now, what we have, I like to call a perfect storm of sorts, where we have individuals tremendously brazen, 20 individuals arrested for upwards of 50 robberies. And out of those 20 individuals, every single one of them is on the streets today.
These children are at risk of being assaulted or even disappearing without a trace.
If they don't have a caring person within their shelter system or who's reaching out to them, then they're not getting access.
I think more police on foot also helps, a better presence.
A deterrent.
Yes.
It's actually a subset of Tranter Aragua, and it's the first one we've seen of that type, and it's the first one that we've seen call out opposition.
So with gang members taking over New York's shelters, our city is becoming a sanctuary for the wrong people. But what nobody's talking about is all of this gang-related activity. It's exactly what you get when you combine the following 3 ingredients. Soft on crime policies that release repeat criminals, laws that prevent police from contacting federal immigration when they arrest wanted fugitives, and a humanitarian system of care that sets asylum seekers up for failure, leaving them homeless and jobless after their temporary shelter stays expire. That combination has given these gangs every tool they could possibly want to recruit new members, commit crime, and then commit crime again after they get arrested because they always get released. And the world's been seeing that happen here in New York for the last year. And this all started when a group of dangerous Venezuelan gang members attacked police last winter in Times Square. And when 4 out of the 5 were immediately released without bail, that was the moment our leaders told the criminal underworld that not only were we a sanctuary city who'd protect them from possible deportation, but that we had other laws as well which would help them commit as much crime as possible. Laws which are even softer on criminals under the age of 18, making them virtually unstoppable. And although the vast majority of the 200,000 asylum seekers who've come here have no intention of joining gangs or living lives of crime, with gang members living in our dysfunctional shelter system, it's only a matter of time before desperate individuals either willingly join them or are forced to join them instead. And that brings us to the real reason why we've now got a gang of teenagers committing crimes over and over again in Times Square and then doing it again after they get arrested. We're so progressive, we've reformed our criminal justice system to the point where only the worst of actions carry any consequences. For adults, for minors, the system is even more lenient, and it's virtually impossible to impose bail on someone under 18 even when they commit a felony, which, as you're about to see, gives these criminals a license to do pretty much whatever they want while living in one of the nicest shelters the city has to offer. So here we are at the Roosevelt Hotel. You can see the entrance right over here where you have the American flags. It's a 1,000-room hotel which is being used as a shelter for asylum seeker families. Plus, it's the arrival center for everybody who comes here and needs a place to stay for the very first time. This is where you check in and get placed in the shelter system. But apparently, it is also where these teenage gang members are residing. And because this is a sanctuary city, the closest police can get is to have a car parked outside on the corner watching the environment in case something goes wrong. They're not actually allowed inside the facility, if you can believe that, unless they have a specific reason to be there, like a warrant for a named individual. But frighteningly, as we're also learning, since these criminals are minors, when they're arrested for doing something wrong, which has happened a whole bunch of times so far, they typically get released, leading to what critics say is a potential potential crime wave the city has no way to stop.
Assistant Chief of Detectives Jason Savino focuses on gangs, and this gang, he says, is made up of asylum seekers being housed at the Roosevelt Hotel. They're a subset of the gang Tranter and self-identify as Los Diablos, or the Little Devils of 42nd Street.
You know, it's crazy to think that one of the buildings that is most prominently part of New York City's efforts to help asylum seekers is featured also in the middle of this crisis, being the place where these gang members are residing. And it's crazy to think that inside this building right now, there could be people who have robbed others just down the street from here, yet police and authority figures are unable to do anything about it. Also, this is supposed to be a shelter for asylum seeker families. You've got women, you've got very young children in here, and it's hard to imagine how this facility is going to help people like that if there are gangs actively operating inside of it. And what's interesting about this is these sanctuary laws that are supposed to protect immigrants, well, they're actually putting the asylum seekers in this facility in danger, those who want to obey the law, because here they are trying to get back on their feet, trying to take advantage of the city's shelter apparatus to benefit their lives, and they can't do it because police are barred from even going inside without a specific cause. And that cause cannot be the idea that there is crime going on and they need to do a foot patrol. No, that doesn't work. They can't do that. They can't just walk up and down the hallways making sure everybody's safe. And even if police are able to get inside the facility like they did 2 months ago at Randall's Island when they did a search and a raid looking for contraband, they can't accomplish much if the people who run the shelter, the security guards, tip off the gang members inside that the police are on their way. That actually happened. The Randall's Island tent facility is a very large shelter that houses around 3,000 people, and there have been reports of gang activity over there as well. This article discusses the raid, how it wasn't able to accomplish a whole lot, and it also discusses speculation that security guards tipped off those inside. Now let's talk about that. If there's going to be a police raid and the security guards at the building tip off whoever's inside that the police are coming, why on earth would they do that? Well, sadly, it's pretty easy to figure out why something like that would happen. If you're security for a place like this building right here, you're going to see the same people coming through the front door over and over again. And if these are criminals who you know are out doing things, getting arrested, and they always seem to come back and the police aren't inside, you've really got to watch yourself. If you're going to rat them out to the police by not warning them of an impending raid, you might get targeted, and this is your job. You got to show up there tomorrow, and the gang members are going to be there tomorrow. And this revelation gives us a lot more insight into how gangs are co-opting these places completely. And that is an even bigger problem once you realize the level of criminal activity that these gang members are apparently involved in.
It's the same group, NYPD Assistant Chief Savino says, that committed multiple crimes in Central Park this summer.
This crew of 20 individuals was arrested upwards of 50 times. 50 times total, and right now, every single one of them is out and about on the streets.
The NYPD has...
So 50 arrests between all of the members of this group of criminals, and they're the same criminals that were assaulting people in Central Park that triggered a total police lockdown of that location. Yet because of New York's recent criminal justice reforms, nothing's been done to stop them. Nobody can stop them, not a police officer, not a judge, because our laws mandate their eternal consequence-free freedom. Now, the reason that that's supposed to be the case is because minors, they're not adults. They can't form their own thoughts and opinions about life. But since these gang members know that they're easily impressionable and can commit crime and get away with it, that explains why there is this recruitment effort going on right here. And what's especially concerning about this is these folks are getting released even after they're caught with dangerous weapons, which you're not supposed to have anywhere in New York. And if you've got gang members who want to have weapons ready to go at any time, they can just give them to people who might be treated lightly by our laws, knowing that if they get caught, nothing's going to happen. But sadly, as you're about to see, the public safety problem this creates for law-abiding asylum seekers and New Yorkers is something that the general public in New York is completely unprepared for.
It started with snatches, and then you saw wolf-pack-type robberies, where you'd see numerous individuals surrounding unsuspected tourists.
I think more police on foot also helps a better presence.
A deterrent.
Yes.
So that's a weapon that was recovered here at the shelter?
Yeah.
It was recovered in the trash. It was hidden in there. It was dumped in there.
It was in a white canvas bag.
Wow. It's pretty crazy to think that weapons are being hidden or disposed of in trash bins on the side of the street. And the people that the news is interviewing, God bless them, but this is a level of criminal activity that I don't think anybody's really ready for. Hopefully it doesn't get any worse. Hopefully the police stay safe while they're doing their jobs. This is just really scary. And even though the young woman who was interviewed made the point that more police would definitely act as a deterrent, it's hard to think of what kind of deterrent they actually are when the criminal's getting arrested. No, they're going to be right back out on the streets in just a few hours. This is also not your typical group of criminals. This Venezuelan gang, they're an international crime syndicate at this point, much more dangerous, much more well-organized, well-funded than any local gang that you may have heard of in this country before. I don't think many people are aware of that, or of how fast they've been growing. They entered the country within the last year, and they're already taking over shelters and recruiting new members. And although now you have some lawmakers who are urging the mayor to do something, saying that he has the power to take action and get people out of shelters who pose a public safety threat, if the mayor were to go and do that, you would have instant protests. There would be instant pushback and lawsuits from advocates. And New York's right to shelter policies, those are the law. And our sanctuary city policies, those are the law as well. These are rules that the mayor can't get around. But probably the worst aspect of all of this is the crime that's taking place at Times Square, which is just down the street from here. It's crime that shouldn't be happening at all, because this is a humanitarian system with buildings like this that are designed, apparently, to help people. But at this point, it's pretty tough to tell who those people are. So here we are in Times Square, where there's a police station right here. This should be one of the safest parts of New York City, but this is where these gangsters have been committing crime, proving that this idea of sanctuary city policies just puts the law-abiding at risk no matter where they're from. Because after people commit crime out here, where do they go back to? They go back to shelters. They've got weapons, they're thugs, they're putting the people in those shelters in danger too.
Migrants and their advocates calling attention to what they say is the city's failure to provide youth with proper care.
These children are at risk of being assaulted or even disappearing without a trace.
If they don't have a caring person within their shelter system, or who's reaching out to them on the street, if that's the situation that they find themselves in.
Now, although the problems in our shelter system are ultimately the fault of the city because it's their system, I'm not really sure what it would matter if we were to have special facilities for people who were under the age of 18, and how are we going to keep people safe without changing the laws to actually go ahead and do that? This article talks about a 15-year-old who's been busted at least 10 times for committing various crimes, and it goes on to mention that he's from Venezuela and is part of this robbery crew that we're learning about. And apparently some of the crimes he's committed on the streets of our city are as bad as first-degree robbery, which he was apparently arrested for and then released. But this happened back in May, and a week later he did something else. Then apparently in July he stole someone's cell phone in Central Park as part of the robbery and crime pattern that the city began to experience over there, and this cycle has just repeated itself without any consequences. Now, I understand that this person's 15. Maybe they're misguided. But at what point is there going to be an intervention in this person's life to get them to stop hurting society? People want to know what's being done about this.
What are you doing about it?
I mean, this is something we've taken them down. You know, we have upwards of 50 arrests on these 20 individuals. Unfortunately, we're just not seeing the prosecution we'd like to see. Obviously, tremendously challenging.
So the chief of detectives here says that the police are doing their job. They're tracking people down, they're making arrests, but then there's no prosecution. Our legal system, the judges in it, they're looking at these criminals, they're feeling things that are different than what the police and the members of the general public are feeling, and they are releasing them. But that might actually be something they are bound to do by the law. Because back in 2018, it was voted that the criminal age of responsibility would not kick in until a person's 18th birthday. And that means that if someone commits a crime and they're under the age of 18, they cannot be considered legally responsible for their actions. Prior to that, minors could be charged as adults in certain circumstances, but it looks like now that doesn't really happen anymore. And critics say that this is just another one of our decriminalization efforts that actually helps the criminal underworld, because now they're recruiting people who in many cases are immune from laws that they themselves fear.
So why is that? If it's been going on for so long, and why hasn't the mayor spoken out about it? Why hasn't there been communication to the public about it until this very moment?
Yeah, as far as the social media post, that's a fairly new phenomenon. And like I said, that upwards progression that we've seen, that started with snatches, then ultimately went to knife point.
That's a fair question. If this is such a big deal, if this is such a big problem, why are we only learning about it now? Well, I'll tell you why. This gang entered the United States within the last year, and things have progressed very rapidly. The detective mentioned the same thing, and the fact that this is happening now should have been obvious. It should have been obvious that we were going to get to a point like this eventually, especially when the warning signs of how our justice system would be taken advantage of, not just in New York, but in other areas of the country, those have been visible for a long time. Who remembers this guy? He was telling people how to abuse our laws and squat in people's homes. And although we've got laws that are designed to keep kids out of jail, which is a good thing, it's naive to think that the criminal underworld's not going to see an opportunity here, and that they're not going to take that opportunity to commit more crime than they were able to commit before. Notice that they're not doing this in law and order states that are not sanctuary cities. It's not happening over there like it's happening here.
Right, because you're saying that you're arresting them, they're back on the street. So what are you doing to protect public, I guess, in the Times Square area or wherever you're staying? Are you increasing a patrol in that area so that it can't happen again if you're saying they are back on the street?
Yeah, I mean, you remember that Central Park robbery spree we saw. You know, you saw the output. You saw the consequence. You saw...
You know, I like this detective. I want him to succeed. I want the police to succeed. But the only thing that happened in Central Park after we packed it with police was the crime that was there went elsewhere. And it very well could be that rising crime in Times Square is the byproduct of increased police presences elsewhere in our city. And it seems like the type of crime we've got now is crime that moves around. It's doing this because once the police plug one leaking hole in our sinking ship of lawlessness, another one springs, and that's where the crime comes out. But that can only happen if you don't have enough police to keep everyone safe at once. And that's what we've got in New York. We don't have enough police. We put them here, the criminals go here. We put them here, the criminals come back. That's what we're witnessing. That's why we have perpetual crime all over the place. And then on top of that, we've got laws that release these criminals after they do something wrong, even when they're adults. But it gets even worse because what we're learning from all of this is that there is no consequence that could possibly get someone's right to shelter revoked, which means it's not a privilege to stay in one of New York City's shelters like the Roosevelt Hotel. You can go out, you can commit crime, you can get released back there, and then while you're there, you can make that place worse because you're not afraid of anything. And that brings up a big question. Should staying in a shelter like the Roosevelt Hotel or one of the big tents at Randall's Island, should that be a privilege? Is that the kind of thing that someone might not be able to have access to if they're out on the streets committing violent crimes? Should that be looked into? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.